It's a Christmas miracle. After an entire year of playing nothing but mediocre indie games that the gaming industry assured me were fantastic, assured me were great, I went ahead and on a whim picked out a random game on the eShop that looked interesting to me, right? And usually over the past couple of years, I've had this problem where everything I try to buy has been terrible, right? I've been very vocal about this, about how there are a lot of indie games that are just not fun to play, that aren't interesting, that aren't engaging, that aren't fresh, that aren't original. And that goes to a lot of really popular stuff. I've talked about Undertale, I've talked about Stardew Valley, I've talked about like Disco Elysium to a certain extent. I've talked about a lot of stuff, right? Like most well-known indie games, and even like AAA projects and studios like Larian and Baldur's Gate 3, they're not worth bothering with. They're not good video games. And I'm finding more and more that the really good stuff that comes out, the really good, interesting indie projects are things that nobody is talking about at all because I saw this game. I saw it was coming out. I put it on my wish list. I was interested in it because of the visual style, right? I knew nothing about it. I didn't know anything about the developer. I just saw it and I was just like, oh yeah, it looks like a Game Boy Color game. I'm a fan of the Game Boy Color aesthetic. I want to see if this game is any good. And upon playing it, I was completely taken aback by how much fun this game was. For a while I was trying to trick myself. I was trying to tell myself that like, well, maybe it's just because I like the aesthetic, or maybe it just appeals to me personally, or maybe this is just one of those games that just came to me at the right time or whatever. But the more I play this game, the more I replay its levels, the more I like go through the collectibles, the more that I like understand like how much fun it is to play. This is probably the best indie game I've played all year. Now, that's not saying a lot because I haven't played a ton of great indie games this year, but this is probably some of the most fun I've had with any release this year. Like, this game really understands what made the Game Boy era so amazing, so energetic, so colorful, while still like appealing to modern sensibilities, right? With being like relatively forgiving and a lot more easy to understand than something like, say, Shantae, which is unfortunately very convoluted. When you look at this game, when you look at what it's like, when you see how like well paced it is, how much variety you get in the level design and the bosses with the mechanics with the characters, like you get like a very well thought out, engaging little platformer with a unique character that's fun to control and is just fun to play as. And I think in a lot of ways that's kind of what makes the game so spectacular. That the game really understands what's actually important. And that is to make a good video game. Right? There is a plot, there are cutscenes, and unfortunately they are the weak link here because like the plot has something to do with like your female lead's boyfriend getting kidnapped and you have to go get him back, and eventually like it's your childhood friend who kidnapped him, and then you end up going on this quest and you have to save the world, and you kind of just forget about him. It's even part of the plot. Like at the ending, it's ridiculous, right? You don't play this game for the plot. It's not very well thought out. It's not interesting, even though the character, the lead, is actually fairly likable, right? Like I love her general design, the way she plays, the way she treats other characters. It's really interesting to play as a female lead in a game that actually does have like is in a committed relationship and is actually trying to like go and save him from like being kidnapped. It actually feels like it feels a lot more like she's a normal girl compared to a lot of other female leads, and I kind of like that about her. Um, but like when you really get down to what makes this game special, what makes it interesting, and that is the simple fact that the developers really went all out with creating something that feels like it could have come from the Game Boy era. They really made something that just really understands the appeals of the aesthetics, the appeal of the gameplay, the appeal of like this kind of visual style, this kind of thing. Like you can tell this was made by people who just grew up on Game Boy era platformers, And it really does seem to have taken a lot of influence from the best of them. Like, the game is, I think, quite a bit faster than any Game Boy era platformer I've ever played. It has better boss fights than any 2D platformer on the Game Boy I've ever played. It has like a lot of personality. It has great music, including a vocal track for the final boss. Like, the game obviously could not actually run on a Game Boy. Like, it does feel like it's a little bit too technically demanding for that. But like the developers really understood like um the era which this the inspirations for this game came from. They really understood what made it appealing, and they really understood how to like fine tune that and make it interesting. Because I was shocked, going through each of the worlds, seeing how like distinct and interesting they were. Um, Seeing the sprite work, seeing the characters. I felt that the character models, particularly for the enemies, were a little bit generic. Like they're just a bunch of skeletons, all right? But when you think about it, like the game does a great job like selling them as like a legit, antagonist, as a legit antagonist. Like they do a great job with the sprite work and the animation and like incorporating them as obstacles, and you just end up kind of liking them. You kind of end up liking what the developers did here, especially with the creative and unique boss fights, which honestly are probably some of the game's highlights. It's crazy the kind of things you see in this game when it comes to the boss fights. And I wish I demonstrated like my favorite examples. The final boss. Like uh, there's a boss where you have to like grab a musical instrument and then play a song in order to like stun it and like hit it. It's it's uh it's crazy the sheer amount of creativity that went into a lot of these fights. They really are some of the most innovative fights I've seen in any 2D platformer in recent years. I am just over the moon about them, and the game has been something that I've gone back to and kept playing even after I've completed it or beat the game. Right, there's like a fake ending apparently. Like apparently there's a real ending if I'm understanding the credits roll specifically. I haven't looked into how to access that. So I'm still playing the game. I'm still trying to 100% it. I'm nowhere close. I'm like collecting all the roses and exploring the world, but like I've played the first couple of levels several times now. I've played the game a lot, and it just gets better and better like as you play it. Like I enjoy playing playing through these levels. I enjoy like getting better and better and improving my movement through them, right? There are like quite a few advanced moves that are quite unique, including the ability to throw your little chime buddy and like bounce off of him for ancient extra height. Like the game does a really good job just really selling you on the adventure. It really, really comes off as if the developers put a lot of thought into how the level should be designed and how the character should move and how she should act. Right? Like one of the only things I understood about the character when I was playing the game is that she came from a circus, that she has a background in gymnastics, and you can actually see that in her animations. Like sometimes when she lands from a high place, you might see this in her video. I think I stopped to demonstrate it. Sometimes when she jumps from a high place, you'll see her like raise her hands up in the air, like she's trying to regain her balance, the same way that like gymnasts do in real life. And things like that really, really sell you on the character in general. Like they really make her more likable, I would argue, compared to like most modern female protagonists. Because she comes off like an interesting person with like an actual background who's going on this adventure, and it's charming, it's fun, it's enjoyable, and I just had an absolute blast playing through it all. And I regret that I haven't been able to 100% it yet. I haven't gotten around to it, but like I have beaten the game. I've seen like the credits. I've beat the final boss. I've seen everything this game has to offer, and it really really doesn't let up. The game really shocked me with its with its conclusion and its epic final stages. Like it really does feel quite a bit unique compared to every other 2D platformer I've ever played. Like I really don't know what I would compare this to. Like it feels kind of like a Sonic game, but it's structured like a Mario one with the stages. It's a weird mix. I don't think I can think of any other game where you have like a buddy following you around that you can like send after enemies the way that Bell can do with Chime, right? I can't really think of anything like that. When I look at everything this game does, it on the surface it looks really simplistic. It looks really basic, but when I really just stop and just think about it, when I play this game, I realize that like, yeah, this is some of the most fun I've had all year. This is absolutely an indie game worth checking out.